Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely huge, a profoundly transformative framework known as the National Unity and Prosperity Act, or NUPA. We're going to break down exactly how tribal nations can legally bypass decades of federal administrative gridlock to build technologically advanced sovereign economic hubs. We are talking about reclaiming economic autonomy on an unprecedented scale, using existing law to turn dormant federal land into incredibly high-yield assets. Let's get into it. Here is our quick strategic roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 5 key areas: landlords of the future, zero risk to reservations, the sovereign key instruments, the MSU and ISC, and we'll wrap up with the recursive wealth engine. All right, part 1, landlords of the future, a cinematic vision of sovereign economic power. I want you to picture this. Imagine a sweeping aerial view of a vibrant, high-tech sovereign land development. We are not talking about small-scale everyday commerce here. We're visualizing massive industrial-scale solar energy arrays, powering sprawling data centers, and highly sustainable logistics hubs, all operating completely under sovereign tribal stewardship. The core philosophy here is actually pretty profound. The framework explicitly states that tribal nations act as the primary stewards and landlords of the future economy, capturing a 40% sovereign royalty from commercial ground rents. This whole idea of indigenous leaders reclaiming their rightful position as the ultimate gatekeepers of a new high-tech economy, that is the anchor of this entire strategy. It's about turning legal sovereignty into real, measurable financial power. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would global megacorporations just agree to this? Well, the magic number is 70. Under the NUPA framework, Tier 1 corporations are fiscally compelled to participate because they get a massive 70% reduction in fixed operational overhead just by leasing these specific lands. This is a crucial point. This is absolutely not a federal charity program. It is a cold, hard, market-driven reality. It simply makes the most financial sense for the corporations to be there. Moving on to Section 2, Zero Risk to Reservations, Protecting Tribal Assets. Look, if you're a sovereign leader, your very first hesitation is obviously going to be about risk, right? Like, what happens if this fails? Do we lose our land? Here is the most important distinction. The NUPA framework exclusively uses underutilized Federal Bureau of Land Management land, and it's capped at just 10% of total BLM holdings. That means absolutely zero existing reservation land is touched. None of it. The framework builds a wall around existing tribal assets by strictly isolating all of this development to outside ancestral adjacent federal lands. And to put the cherry on top, the financial exposure is exactly $0.00. This entire economic engine operates without a single taxpayer dollar. And even more importantly for tribal leaders, it requires absolutely no financial capital or pledges from the participating tribes. None. The tribe provides the legal authority, the sovereign key, and the private sector brings the capital. The risk to tribal treasuries is mathematically zero. Okay, Section 3. The sovereign key instruments, unlocking the legal architecture. So how do you actually bypass all that bureaucratic gridlock without needing an act of Congress just to get started? You do it with what's called the sovereign key. This comes directly from a unique legal authority under 28 U.S.C. Section 1505, otherwise known as the Indian Tucker Act. Think of it like a legal sovereign tow truck. It allows tribal nations to cut straight through decades of federal red tape and legally force the government to the table, pulling that dormant BLM land into direct stewardship right now without waiting on new legislation. This all kicks off in what the framework calls Phase 1 ignition. Step 1, the tribe officially opts in. Step 2, those Tier 1 corporations we mentioned provide this spark by dropping $25,000 per 100-acre block straight into a neutral third-party escrow account. Notice how that completely bypasses the usual federal funding loops? Step 3 is the self-funding launch using those corporate deposits. And finally, Step 4 is the deterministic vesting of the land into a community land trust. Let's look at Section 4, the MOSU and ISC. The clean digital interface of empowerment. If you are sitting in a C-suite or a tribal council chamber right now, you need to know about the 2 clean, highly professional legal documents that actually make this sovereign key turn in the lock. The first one is the Memorandum of Sovereign Understanding, or the MOSU. It's a brilliantly simple 2-page document specifically designed for tribes who currently have ancestral lands managed by the Bureau of Land Management right adjacent to them. It acts as their formal, unassailable yes to activate up to 5 NUPA hubs on that federal land. But wait, what if a tribe doesn't have adjacent BLM land? That is exactly where this second instrument comes in, the Interjurisdictional Sovereignty Compact, or ISC. Think of this as a sort of peace treaty or a formal equity partnership document. It ensures that landlocked tribes can partner up with host tribes who do have BLM land. They collaboratively manage the hub and share in the exact same economic rewards. The beauty here is that nobody gets left behind just because of modern geography. Just to break this down super clearly so we're all on the same page, if your tribe has adjacent ancestral BLM land, you use the MOU to activate the hub. If your tribe is landlocked, you use the ISC to partner with the host tribe. It's a wonderfully logical legal architecture, ensuring every single sovereign nation knows exactly which tool applies to their specific geographic advantage. And finally, Section 5, the Recursive Wealth Engine, Structuring Long-Term Prosperity. Okay, so the hubs are built, the corporations are paying their ground leases. Where does the money actually go? How do we ensure this creates real, self-sustaining prosperity? Enter the 40-40-20 Sovereign Adaptive Waterfall. It's an incredible mechanism that perfectly balances sovereign power, individual wealth, and physical infrastructure. 40% goes to a sovereign royalty, 40% goes to a beneficiary dividend, and 20% goes straight into hub reinvestment. It literally operates as a closed-loop engine that perpetually compounds wealth. Let's track that cash flow a bit more closely. The absolute most crucial point here is that the 40% sovereign royalty flows directly into the tribal treasury. No federal strings attached, no oversight committees. It is absolute, unrestricted control for the tribe to use however they see fit. The other 40% flows as a dividend directly to verified descendants to help settle historical lineage torts. And that last 20%? It's hard-coded to perpetually rebuild and maintain the hub's Tier 4 power and fiber optics, keeping the infrastructure world-class. Now, before we wrap up, I want to briefly highlight one more thing, because this matters universally. Remember those massive 70% land discounts corporations get? Well, the framework uses that leverage to mathematically mandate that those companies prioritize human labor over automation. They call it the human firewall. It literally protects blue-collar workers from AI displacement by making human beings cheaper to employ than robots, simply because the companies are saving so much on real estate. Pretty brilliant, right? Ultimately, NUPA is an incredibly comprehensive, totally airtight blueprint for economic sovereignty and long-term financial independence. So I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. With zero risk to existing tribal assets, zero reservation land on the line, and the legal architecture already sitting there in existing statutes, will tribal leaders step up, seize the sovereign key, and claim their rightful position as the landlords of the future? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to dive deeper into the NUPA framework. See you next time.